The history of video games is an odd one. From living room novelty to multi-billion-dollar industry, let me take you on a trip through history to really see how video games came to be. To understand the history of video games, you must first know what a video game actually is. A video game is defined as a program designed purely for entertainment, and that also has some way for humans to interact with it in the real world. If you ask someone what the first video game was, they will more than likely respond with Pong, and while they may be right, they are also wrong at the same time. Really, the first video game was called Tennis for Two, designed by William Higginbotham and built by Robert Dvorak at Brookhaven National Laboratory in 1958. It was played on a government computer used for calculating missile trajectories, but it was a far cry from what we know as video games today. After Tennis for Two came a game called Space War. It was built by students at MIT in early 1962 on a computer called the PDP-1. It depicted a duel between two spaceships, each controlled by a player using a custom-built control box. It was immensely popular with students at MIT, but the game was not played in many other places than MIT, considering that the computer it is played on cost $100,000 or $1 million in today's currency. Video games up to this point were not played by many people. A man named Ralph Baer saw this and wanted to make video games playable by anyone at home and on their own television. This idea was called the Magnavox Odyssey. The games it came with included chase, racing, target, shooting, or sports games. These games only performed modestly and failed to jumpstart a new industry. However, the system did directly influence the birth of a vibrant video arcade game industry. In 1972, Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney started a company called Atari. Taking inspiration from the Magnavox and tennis games, they created Pong. Pong hit the market in 1973, and being featured in coin-operated arcade machines laid the foundation for a booming arcade industry. During the golden age of arcade is when we got many of the classic games you may still recognize today, such as Space Invaders in 1978, Asteroids in 1979, Missile Command in 1980, Galaga in 1981, Donkey Kong in 1981, and Cuber in 1982. This was also when everyone's favorite plumber was created. This golden age of arcade games was the first time video games could be seen as an industry. Many people see this as the best years in gaming, creating a huge amount of classics that many still play today, such as The Legend of Zelda in 1986, Dragon Quest, also in 1986, Final Fantasy in 1987, and Metal Gear, also in 1987. The NES being the main star of the show during these years. The 8-bit era's nostalgic factor and iconic music will keep the 8-bit era echoing on through history. This is a time many millennials can remember vividly. This was when the Sony PlayStation and Nintendo 64 made their debut, producing some of the most iconic games of all time, such as Super Mario 64 in 1996, GoldenEye 007 in 1997, and The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time in 1998. These video games were huge economic successes and are known as flagship titles of the time. All of these events, good and bad, have brought us to where we are today, a world where you can be good at video games and make a living from it. A world where there are more video games released every single day than every video game in history combined, and a world where an industry that started on a whim is now worth $91.5 billion in 2015. History is being made every single day, and it is interesting to think where video games may go in the future.